Tonight, we begin a story of deception and survival on the front lines in eastern Ukraine. Russia believed it had a foolproof plan. The objective was the strategic city of Pokrovsk. The method was a classic military maneuver, the pincer. Russian forces were closing in on the nearby city of Mirnohrad. Their goal was to surround it, trap Ukrainian defenders, and create a new avenue of attack toward their larger prize. By mid-November, the situation looked dire. Reports from the ground said the exit gap from Mirnohrad was shrinking fast. It was down to just 2 miles. The jaws of the Russian pincer were about to snap shut. A pincer movement is brutal in its simplicity. An attacking force splits into 2 columns. They move around the flanks of a defender, one from the north, one from the south or east and west. They aim to meet behind the enemy, cutting off all escape and supply routes. Defenders are trapped in a pocket, forced to fight on multiple fronts with dwindling resources. Russia has a long and bloody history with this tactic. It famously used a pincer to encircle the German 6th Army at Stalingrad. The first step in Ukraine's counter-plan was not a massive assault, but a series of precise, surgical strikes. The target was the town of Rodinsky, another point on the map Russia needed to control for its Pokrovsk campaign. Ukrainian aerial reconnaissance had been working overtime. They identified critical Russian assets gathering in and around the town. Their first target was a group of Russian drone operators. These teams are the eyes of the modern battlefield, guiding artillery, spotting troop movements. They were reportedly setting up a new base in an old mine east of Rodinsky. They were a high-value target, and Ukraine knew it had the perfect weapon for the job. A Ukrainian Su-27 fighter jet was scrambled. Attached to its wings was an American-made GBU-62 JDAM. The Joint Direct Attack munition is not just a bomb. It is a guidance kit that turns a standard, unguided bomb into a smart weapon. According to the U.S. Navy, it uses GPS and laser guidance to hit targets with incredible accuracy, often landing within 20 feet of its designated coordinate. The JDAM is designed to destroy hardened structures, bunkers, command posts. One such bomb, weighing up to 2,000 pounds, was dropped on the mine. The drone operator base was obliterated in a single massive explosion. Moments later, the same tactic was repeated. Ukrainian surveillance identified another group of Russian soldiers. These troops were fortifying a building on the outskirts of Rodinsky, likely preparing a staging point for a deeper push into the town. They were also trying to establish a foothold for future assaults. Another JDAM was called in. The airstrike was devastating. Euromaidan Press reported the strike leveled the makeshift fortification and eliminated several Russian officers who were leading the local raids. Ukraine was systematically dismantling Russia's command and control in the area, creating chaos and confusion just as their larger plan began to unfold. But Russia was also trying to infiltrate Rodinsky on the ground. Militarny reported Russian soldiers with tank support were using the dense fog to their advantage. They were sneaking into the town using first-person view FPV drones for cover. Ukraine responded in kind. An armored unit pushed into the fog, surprising the Russian forces and engaging them directly. The fog that Russia thought was its cover became a liability, hampering its own drone pilots. After a series of engagements and another JDAM strike on an industrial complex, the Russian forces were pushed out of Rodinsky. The town was secure for now, but these strikes were just the prelude. Ukraine had seized the momentum. But momentum on the battlefield is fleeting. Ukrainian commanders knew that Russia would be expecting a counterattack. They decided to give them exactly what they were looking for, or rather, the illusion of it. This was the most critical part of the operation, a brilliantly staged fake assault. Ukraine began moving troops. Ukraine began moving equipment clearly visible to Russian surveillance drones, clearly visible to Russian surveillance satellites. The movements were directed north of Rodinsky toward the Dobropilya front. It was designed to look like a major Ukrainian offensive was building. The goal was to convince Russian commanders that Ukraine was preparing to launch its own pincer movement, aiming to trap the Russian forces that were themselves trying to encircle Mirnohrad. The deception worked perfectly. As Russian surveillance fed reports of the Ukrainian buildup back to their commanders, panic set in. Fearing a full-scale assault that could cut off their own forward units, Russian commanders made a critical decision. They diverted forces. Troops reserves. They were repositioned to defend against the phantom Ukrainian attack coming from the Dobropilya direction. Russia was now on the defensive, reacting to a threat that did not exist. They were playing directly into Ukraine's hands, shifting their focus and their firepower away from their primary objective. This maneuver is a textbook example of military deception. You create pressure in one sector to force your enemy to react, and then you exploit the opening you have created elsewhere. By simulating an attack on the flank, Ukraine forced Russia to look away from Myrnohrad at the most crucial moment. Russian units, which had been pushing forward to close the 2-mile gap, halted their advance and began preparing defensive positions. This pause, this momentary shift in focus, was exactly what Ukraine needed. It created a brief, invaluable window of opportunity. It was time to relieve the defenders of Myrnohrad. Right, that's it. Section 4. The window of opportunity. While Russian eyes were fixed on the fake assault building to the north, Ukraine executed the true mission. Under the cover of this elaborate distraction, convoys began moving toward Myrnohrad. These were not attack columns, they were lifelines. The vehicles were packed with ammunition, food, medical supplies, fresh soldiers. The path into the city had been a deadly corridor hours before, but was now temporarily open. Ukraine used the very gap Russia had created to reinforce the city. It was a bold, calculated risk executed with precision. The operation required more than a distraction. To protect the convoys from any remaining Russian drones or artillery, Ukraine deployed electronic countermeasures. These systems jam enemy signals, blind drones, and throw guided munitions off course. Convoys rolled into Myrnohrad and rolled out again, all under that protective bubble. Wounded, exhausted soldiers were carefully evacuated. Fresh, well-supplied troops replaced them and continued the fight. The psychological impact on Myrnohrad's defenders cannot be overstated. Section 5. The Unseen Adversary. Winter's Looming Threat. This entire operation was not just about saving Myrnohrad for a day or a week. The ultimate goal was to hold the line until the arrival of a powerful, impartial ally, the Ukrainian winter. In eastern Ukraine, winter is a force of nature that changes warfare. Freezing temperatures, heavy snowfall, frozen ground. These factors make large-scale offensive operations incredibly difficult. Vehicles get bogged down. Supply lines become treacherous. Soldiers suffer frostbite and exhaustion. Ukraine's deception bought time measured in degrees Celsius. Cold season starts in mid-November. It lasts until early March. January is the coldest month, averages around 25 degrees near 4 degrees. Lows can reach 13 degrees, 11 degrees. For an attacking army, these conditions are a nightmare. Equipment fails, fuel thickens. Keeping soldiers warm and fed becomes a monumental logistical challenge. Russia's advance slows as the mercury drops. Section 6. The Human Cost. Attrition in the Pokrovsk meat grinder. The battle for Pokrovsk and its surrounding areas has been one of the bloodiest of the war. For over 18 months, Russia has thrown wave after wave of soldiers at this sector, turning the landscape into what many call a meat grinder. The cost in human lives has been staggering. While precise numbers are difficult to verify, the claims from various sources paint a grim picture of the attrition Russia is facing. According to a November 16th report in The Sun, quoting former NATO planner Philip Ingram, Russia may have suffered as many as 135,000 soldiers killed or wounded in the battle for Pokrovsk alone. That is a devastating number for a single axis of advance. These figures, while high, are consistent with other reporting. Writer David Axe noted up to 100,000 casualties in the first 9 months of 2025 in this sector. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky claimed in October 2025 alone over 25,000 Russian losses, mostly in the Donetsk direction. Ukraine's strategy in Myrnohrad is designed to make these numbers climb even higher, forcing Russia into a protracted winter battle for a now fortified city. Ukraine is ensuring that any territorial gain will come at a maximum cost in Russian blood and treasure. It is a brutal calculus, but it is the reality of a war of attrition. Section 7. The next move. A short-term win and the long road ahead. So what does this all mean for the immediate future? Ukraine's brilliant deception at Myrnohrad is a significant short-term victory. It is not a war-winning move, but it has dramatically changed the local situation. It has relieved a garrison on the verge of collapse, restocked it for a long winter fight, and humiliated Russian commanders who fell for the trick hook line sinker. The immediate threat of encirclement at Myrnohrad has been averted. The city is not safe, but its defenses are stronger than they have been in weeks. The operation demonstrates that Ukrainian forces remain agile, creative, and capable of outthinking a larger adversary. The next move belongs to Russia. The Kremlin has two choices. It can pause its offensive in this sector to regroup, reassess, and wait for better weather, effectively conceding that its autumn campaign has failed. Or it can double down, pouring even more troops and resources into the fight in a desperate attempt to break the Ukrainian defenses before the winter freeze fully sets in. For Ukraine, the task is clear. Hold on. The key is to keep the logistics corridor into Myrnohrad open, even if it is under constant threat. This means continuing to use coordinated defenses between Pokrovsk and Dobropilya to tie down Russian forces. It means using their own precision weapons, like the JDAMs, to strike Russian command posts, supply dumps, troop concentrations. Every day that Ukraine holds the line is a victory. It is another day closer to the deep freeze that will bog down the Russian war machine. It is another day for Russian casualties to mount and for their offensive momentum to dissipate into the frozen mud. This single operation is a microcosm of the wider war. It is a conflict defined not just by brute force, but by intelligence, deception, and resilience. It shows that even in a war of drones and satellites, classic military arts like the feint can still decide the fate of a battle. Ukraine has bought itself precious time. How it uses that time and how Russia chooses to respond will determine the course of the war in Donetsk through the long, cold winter months ahead. For now, the defenders of Myrnohrad have a fighting chance, thanks to a genius trick that turned Russia's own strategy against them. Stay with us for more frontline analysis and updates from Pokrovsk and Myrnohrad.